React documentation has really great article about custom hooks, but it seems to be quite overwhelming for beginners, I think. Look at this scroll. This article is really a deep dive into all the details, but still it's huge, and I think maybe beginners need some assistance. For example, live coding from the very beginning and to the full ready custom hook to be done step by step. This is basically what we are gonna do today. I prepared a small React application, really small for the demonstration purposes. So we have our button and some dialog component. And our aim is today to create a custom hook that will encapsulate everything inside, making proper toggling of this dialog and displaying it or hiding it and some maybe additional stuff. So let's begin. We're going to create a new hook. But what is basically a custom hook? A custom hook is still a function. Let's do it. Use dialog. But the difference from the simple function is its prefix, of course. We need to utilize the keyword use from the very beginning. This will say to React that it's not a simple function, but it's a React hook that still needs to be included into the React's lifecycle. Another important thing is our params. And the one thing I was struggling from the very beginning when I started to use custom hooks was that I was confused a bit with these params and how they works comparing to the params, for example, for another built-in hooks. I mean that, for example, we have a useState. And the first param of the useState can be any value actually. But the documentation says that React takes this value only once, and after that it doesn't get updated. So I was confused whether my params in custom hook are always fresh. I mean, if I use my hook and pass some prop 1, I need this prop to be passed inside my hook as it is from all these props of the component. And after I receive this prop here, then I use it somehow in useEffect, for example. After some time playing with it and reading an article again and again, I figured out that it just works. It's all the time fresh, like any parameter of the simple function. Let's make a type for our use dialog. This way it will be easier for us to not make some silly mistakes during our live creation of this use dialog custom hook. Now let's go to the return value. React documentation says that return value can be any arbitrary value, anything that you would like it to be. Null or an array or an object, just anything. But here's the important thing. Once you return an array or an object like here, this means this would be every time new object. It's not the same value like, for example, returning some string and then you can compare and it will be the same. No, it's all the time ever new object. Why is it important? Just because if you return an object here and then pass it directly to some dependencies array, for example, of the useEffect, then it will trigger useEffect to run on each re-render. Meaning useEffect will be triggered just because its dependencies array will receive every time a new value. Okay, I think we've covered all the basics. Let's try to implement our hook. We can start simply by defining our interface of the hook and then just implement it step by step. We have params. Let's don't touch it for a moment and just define our return value. For our dialog, we of course need some boolean value to get to know if it's opened or closed. So let it be is open as a boolean. And we have a button that needs to toggle our dialog. So it's gonna be toggle, which is some function. All right, We can do simply the same in our return object, for now with some stub values. Alright, now we can use simply useState to make it all work. Alright, isOpen is the same variable, and toggle we need to implement. We will need to use an updater function to rely on the previous value. By the way, toggle means like we enable and disable using the same button. And let's of course implement this interface like this. And we need to utilize this one. Cool, looks like it just works as expected, so we can move on. I see here room for potential micro optimization. I'm going to, let's say, memoize this callback just to receive some cached value, because it's just a regular handler. So I can utilize useCallback here. Let's create function called toggle. Fine, let's check it still works. Yep. Now let's make our example a bit more complex, and let's try to see how the params actually works. So we're gonna to extend our type with params. I think we need to pass dynamically this initial value to make some control over it. It will be initial, which is boolean. But to see in action that params are all the time fresh, we need to provide some dynamic value. And I think we need to create some parameter like force close, let it be. If we provide this parameter, our dialog should be closed immediately. So usually it will be either undefined or the false, and once it becomes true, our dialog should be closed without clicking toggle dialog. Let's do it. So params. Oh, nice. TypeScript already says we need one argument. Let's do it. It should be initial, which is false. Now let's utilize it here. Okay, we are done here. Now it's time to work with force close. For this param, we would need to use useEffect. We need to add it to the dependencies array in order to trigger this effect. So our logic is, if force close gets changed and becomes true, then we need to force closing our dialog, just to make set open to false. All right, it should work. In order to test it, we need to add additional logic in the app component. We also need to add some state here. And I am going to add also an interval which will change the value each 5 seconds, for example. Okay, and we again need to have a useEffect here. So let's start our interval, window.setInterval. And of course, let's assign the returned integer into some variable. Each 5 seconds, as we decided. It needs to call setForce, again relying on the previous value. Let's also not forget to make our cleanup of the useEffect, because we need to remove our interval. And here we need to pass our number that we stored previously. And we need to pass force value into our useDialog custom hook. Force close. Now I would suggest to add a console log just to see in action that values are gets changed every 5 seconds. Here we're passing dynamic value into our custom hook. Let's test it. We opened our dialog and soon it should get closed. Yes, it's closed. And you can see how values here are updated. We have two console logs just because in dev mode it triggers useEffect twice. That's actually will identify if we added our clear interval or not. If we don't add it, our logic won't work. Looks like we covered pretty a lot in this quite simple example, but still this is the backbone concepts and rules with all caveats that we've covered today that you can apply to creating any your custom hook. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.